Welcome, everyone. Episode 5 of the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast, and we are 1 week away from the 2024 regular season. I'm getting fired up. I'm getting over, maybe, finally, the end of last year, and how the Dolphins fell flat, crushing it beginning of the year, high-powered offense, and then injuries obviously were a factor. However, injuries shouldn't be an excuse because there's really no excuse in how you blew a 5-game lead with 3 games to go, going into essentially the Buffalo game, blew it at home. That one, it still stings, and it's going to take a while to really get over for any Dolphin fan. And then obviously that hurt them, setting them up to go to Kansas City in the cold, which was basically a lose-lose situation. But we're going to try and put all that in the rearview mirror. It's a new year. We're going to turn the page. Lots been going on this week. A lot has gone on in the mini camps, training camps, full preseason, and we're about ready to kick off the football in a week at Hard Rock Stadium against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So going to be very, very interesting. And then Thursday Night Football, 4 days later, you got the Buffalo Bills. So you got back-to-back home games and a humongous opportunity for the Dolphins to set themselves up in the AFC. So the week that was, very interesting week as you go from the 90-man roster down to 53. Couple surprises in the 53-man roster. A couple of things that they had to do that were strategic. There's some things you like. There's some things you don't like. We'll start with what you don't like. So Dolphins in May signed free agent Odell Beckham Jr. He's had a tremendous career. Obviously, he's on the backside of it. Last year had a pretty decent season with the Ravens. Definitely not the Odell, of 2016, 2017 with the Giants. However, his role on this team was essentially to be a number 3. And really, at the end of the day, he's going to be kind of like the guy who's going to back up Tyreek and Jalen Waddle. And if one of them goes down, he's going to be, kind of thrust into the limelight. He essentially did not practice in any sessions in minicamp, did not practice in training camp, and there's been, rumors of him having a surgery in the offseason that's been very undisclosed, and the Dolphins put him on the PUP, physically unable to perform list, keeping him out of the first 4 games, which it hurts because it's like you signed a guy for a year and he's going to be in that role, and now they say he wanted to basically give it a go, but the Dolphins, to their credit, they definitely see the long-term vision of a season, and they're not going to put him at risk. So he is now out the first 4 games, which hurts. So we'll start here looking at the roster. So number 1 on the 53, last week, Dolphins cut Mike White after a very lackluster preseason. And there's a lot even behind that because Mike White didn't have a good preseason, didn't have a good camp. And Mike McDaniel kind of admitted that what he did was he put his backup quarterbacks, Skylar Thompson and Mike White, in tough situations. So this way they were prepared. But Mike White was really put in kind of like a lose-lose situation because he was not put in there with guys who were really going to make the roster. He struggled. He played very poorly in the preseason games. And they cut him. And I think probably ultimately they wanted to re-sign him to the practice squad. But lo and behold, who does he go to? Buffalo Bills. So now you have some people down here saying, hey, is Mike White going to give the Bills all the Dolphins secrets? I don't know if it's going to necessarily matter one way or another. If they're going to beat you, they're going to beat you. And I don't think it's going to take brain surgery for them to kind of figure out what the Dolphins are going to do. The Dolphins are a very high-powered offense with a lot of different packages, and certainly this year there's going to be a lot of different packages from a tight end perspective, which I'm going to get to. So you have some people down here worried about that. I don't think it's going to be the end-all, be-all of life. But be that as it may, he ends up with Buffalo. So your quarterback room, obviously Tua is your starter, Skylar Thompson number 2, and then they signed Tim Boyle. I don't know what in the hell they saw in Tim Boyle. I watched them live last year on the Jets. He was god-awful, and he looked basically like an inept, not an NFL quarterback. They put him on the practice squad, so it is what it is. They are going to probably have to do something here to getting a number 3 in the mix. And I think the reason they signed him was because of him having a link to the tree of Mike McDaniel and knowing the system, because that's the thing with this system and with all these coaches. They have a system. They want a guy who knows the system. Makes sense. I get it. But he's is basically horrendous. So hope and pray Tua stays healthy, and even Skylar Thompson, he's not that great either. But those are your 2 QBs. So pray QB1 Tua stays healthy. Then interesting in the running back room, Devon Achane, Alec Ingold at fullback. Jeff Wilson Jr. was kind of the surprise, and Jalen Wright, the rookie. And then they cut Brooks, who had gotten a concussion in that second preseason game, who was a second-year player. And I think he was just a matter of too many injuries. So what's interesting there, Jeff Wilson, a lot of people thought would be on the block, either the trade block or the cut block. And he made it through probably because of the injury to Brooks, because I think he would have probably edged him out. So the strength of this team, to me, one of the biggest strengths is absolutely the running back room. You got some really solid guys in that room. And I think Alec Ingold is a guy that they did not utilize enough last year. He could be an interesting wrinkle into the offense this season, and I think he should be, along with the tight ends. But very good running back room. Really like it. I think you could have a lot of explosiveness. And look, I scream run the ball. I'm the run the ball guy. So let's hope that we can consistently do that. You definitely see something out of Jalen Wright. You know what you got out of A-Chain. You know what you're going to get out of Mostert. You're probably going to get less Mostert because he's older, which is fine. Keep him fresh. And, hopefully you can keep these guys relatively healthy for the season. I think that'll be a real if something's going to get you over the hump, in my opinion, it's going to be the running back room. Wide receiver. Now, here is we'll call it negative, and I think maybe it's a little bit more negative on paper. Talked about what went on with Odell. So it leaves you with 4 wide receivers, which is problematic. You got Braxton Berrios, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Malik Washington, rookie, who is not great. Talked about it last week from a hands perspective. He's definitely probably going to be your kick returner, punt returner, either both or one with Berrios, most likely. Maybe get A-Chain in there. Light in that room. Then what you did is you went out and you re-signed Robbie Chosen to the practice squad. He was here last year, knows the system. He's a professional, older pro, and if something happens, somebody gets hurt and he gets called up, fine. He knows the system. So kind of a smart move there. But it's a little thin. And it's interesting because you went into the camp, hey, we got all this depth at wide receiver, and I feel like this is like a Dolphin thing. They either have like all this depth at wide receiver or all this depth at corner over the years, and then lo and behold, 5 minutes later, 17 of 18 guys are hurt, kind of a deal. So it's light. Now here's where next with the tight ends, they're kind of, I think, making up for it. So Tanner Conner, Julian Hill, Jonnu Smith, Durham Smythe. This year, there is no doubt about it, the new wrinkle in the offense is going to be the tight end. So from a number 3 receiver perspective, I think you're going to see a hell of a lot of Jonnu Smith. There's specific packages. You saw a little bit of it in the first preseason game, getting the ball in his hands, running the ball up the seam. It's literally what's been missing in an electric offense, which absolutely could make it even more electric. So although you have the 4 wideouts, you have these 4 tight ends, and then the other one is Tanner Conner, who kind of has the body type of a wide receiver. I definitely think you're going to see him there. I definitely think you're going to see Julian Hill, a guy they really like, second-year guy. So you're definitely going to see, particularly early on with Odell out and having 4 wideouts, a hell of a lot of tight end. Okay. Now, the much maligned offensive line that this week, for the second year in a row, GM Chris Greer basically came out to the media and said, you guys worry about the offensive line more than we do, because there's been a lot of stories about how the interior of this line is weak. Now, to his credit, him and McDaniel, and it's more McDaniel dictating to him, believe in athletic offensive linemen. That's kind of what they told you this week. And I understand. I get it. You have a fast athletic offense. You want to have fast athletic linemen. Robert Hunt and not re-signing him, you could use that in somewhat of an example because he's a bigger dude at guard. And then obviously the bigger thing was the money. They were not going to pay him what the Panthers paid him because that was just ludicrous to pay a guard. However, here's where I think we were going to hurt a little bit, and I got to believe it when I see it. Now, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. The Lions played very well last 2 years. Tua came out this past week and said, hey, I got the ball out fast, which to me, it's kind of a slight to the line, but sure, he does. It helps it. The X factor is you have good tackles. So you got Armstead, Aaron Brewer at center, who's still hurt. I would expect him to play. He was not put on PUP. He's on the roster. I'd expect him to play week 1. But you have an undersized, brand new center. I can guarantee you there's probably going to be snap issues. So you heard it here first. Aaron Brewer, Lester Cotton, Jack Driscoll, Liam Eichenberg, Austin Jackson, Robert Jones, Kendall Lamb, Andrew Mayer, Patrick Paul. I don't know, man. I'm a little worried. Oh, and actually Driscoll, he was on the original 53. He did get cut because he got steamrolled in the preseason game. I don't know. The end of the day, the organization, McDaniel, and the way the offense runs and wanting athletic offensive linemen, that's one side of it. But if there's something that I'm going to continuously get on Chris Grier for in his tenure here, it's going to be the lack of importance that's put on the interior of the line, which always leads me down the physicality route, which leads you down the, hey, can we get a 3rd and 1? Can we get a 3rd and 2? Can we get a 4th and 1, a 4th and 2? Talked about the stats on that last week, which they're very poor in them converting. Also heard a stat this week on a good podcast I listened to talking about how when they're in the 11 formation, they're good at converting those. So there's some formation stuff there. But at the end of the day, that line, if they're all healthy, and God knows, can you ever remember a season that a whole team was all healthy? It just doesn't happen. People get hurt. All healthy, they're probably above average. Injured, they're very much below average. You never know with Armstead. The guy's an all-pro, but he's very long in the tooth. And if you think he's playing 17 games, he's never done it in his career. I don't know why it would start now. Eichenberg, he's a project. I think if he could stay at guard and stay there, he'd probably find that home, and he'd probably be, we'll say, enough and proficient. The problem is you already got Brewer hurt. Eichenberg's your backup center, and you just know it's a matter of time. Eichenberg's going to be playing center, and you're going to just shuffle these cards. Last year, the key was they got good productivity out of guys like Lester Cotton, Robert Jones. Like, you got productivity on the line out of those guys, and it just became, it was just not enough, because then at the end of the year last year, you had Robert Hunt out for the end of the year. You got Connor Williams was out at the end of the year, which is interesting because you could have made an argument they should have re-signed him after the injury. He went to Seattle. I think he probably had a bad taste in his mouth because you wanted a contract. The Dolphins said no in the offseason last year. Then he blows out his knee. Very unfortunate, good player. But the line's an X factor to me. And their philosophy of the offense, you can't question it because the offense is obviously very good and electric. The question is this: is the offense built for Madden football, or is the offense built for Super Bowl football? So, like, they can score points. They're going to score points. They're going to go over the top. They're going to, hit big plays, be fast, be exciting. They're like the funnest offense to watch, which, if you're a Dolphin fan, is actually amazing to say that because they've had some dog shit offenses since Marino. But is that what it's going to take if you don't have a home game, if you don't have home field, if you need, clutch 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1 play, you got to run the guy over in front of you. is that going to be enough? I'm hoping they're going to do some stuff and be very creative in their formations on the short yardage. So there's two things that like I need to see, and I think you're going to see them very early on. The tight end thing, you can take it to the bank. They're going to go at tight end production. Number two is going to be they're not a smash mouth team. They're going to run it down your throat, but can you do it in select spots and moments in games where you need to make it happen? Or are we going to continue to be hey, it's 3rd and 1 and let's throw the ball twice? Like, again, can you do that on occasion? Hell yeah, 100%. You got some good fast receivers, and there were some instances last year that they converted those, and there was other instances that like they were very close and should have. But ultimately, I think that over the top winning football has to be we can line up, we can be in an I formation, and I can smash you in the mouth and we can run for a yard, and you can't stop me. You know, the good teams, the Baltimores that are out there and teams like that will do that. So that's my concern on the line. So knock on wood. And I'm sure there's going to be some other guys signed on the practice squad on the O-line. So defensive line. Now we go to the defensive side of the ball. You lost Christian Wilkins. You know, I've said it before. You probably should have signed him the year early. He definitely was overpaid. Very, very good player. And they've now literally tried, I don't even know the amount of bodies they signed in the offseason. It's got to be upwards of 15 to 20. They've had guys like Shaq Barrett retire. They've had injuries to guys. They have guys who are longer in the tooth. They're going to have a hell of a rotation. From a D-line perspective, Calais Campbell, who's going to be a Hall of Fame player, but he's 37 years old. Deshaun Hand, Benito Jones, Brandon Peely, Zach Sealer. Those 5 guys are going to be a huge X factor, because last year, in having a top 10 defense, in my opinion, the reason they did, the core of it, and again, it always goes back to running an interior play. The core of why they were good was because Sealer and Wilkins played almost probably 95% of the snaps in the middle, and they just plugged and stuffed the run really for one of the first years in probably the last 10 to 12 years that the Dolphins had a stout run defense. So then what that led itself to was you couldn't run on them, and then you had these good corners and a pretty good secondary, and then you can't really pass on them because, you know, they're able to kind of do their thing. I'm very worried about the interior of the D-line, and if I'm playing the Dolphins and I'm the Jaguars and the Bills and whoever, I'm literally coming out and I'm smashing it up the middle, and I'm going to say, stop me. So if I'm going into that Jaguar game and I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'm running that ball, and then I'll pick my spots and stuff, and I'm going to open it up. And then when I open it up, you're going to get the Dolphins defense, Holland, secondary, Poyer. You're going to get them having to creep up and support on the run. That's my worry, because that is a snowball problem that the Dolphin defense has had for years outside of last year. And it's interesting because nobody really talks about it, but when you look at the numbers and you look at the stats, the amount of games that in years prior that they allowed over 100 yards, 130 yards. I mean, hell, they've had some major run games against them in a passing league, and last year it wasn't. Lo and behold, you had a hell of a lot better defense. So that's going to be an X factor. Like a guy like Calais Campbell, he's a Hall of Fame player, but he's 37. You're not going to get the same amount of snaps that you did out of, like with Wilkins. You're just not. The other worry would be, I think Zach Sealer is a very good player, but I think he's a hell of a lot better player when he's got Christian Wilkins next to him. So I think you're asking a lot of him to kind of take on that burden and double teams and what have you. There has to be support. Now, here's hopefully where you'll get some support in this Anthony Weaver defense. Linebacker, Quentin Bell, Jordan Brooks, Kamara, rookie, David Long Jr., Emmanuel Ogba back, Jalen Phillips coming off the injury, Duke Riley as a backup, Chop Robinson, the rookie, Channing Tindall, probably more special teams, Anthony Walker Jr. The first few guys there are key. The Jordan Brooks move, I think, was an upgrade. I think David Long Jr., I think, is a very solid player, and I think last year he was in the mix of that defense. He was not a fit in that scheme. I think he's going to be a better fit in this scheme. That linebacker core is going to have to do a hell of a job supporting the D-line and stuffing the run. But I do think linebacker-wise, you upgraded from the Jerome Bakers that you had. Jerome Baker, good player, solid player, lots of tackles every year. Fairly healthy outside of last year. But I think you upgrade a little bit. And that's going to be key, So I think you almost look at it like you lost some in the D-line, but you gained some in the linebackers. So hopefully that can be a wash from a defensive standpoint in the run game. In the secondary, Ethan Bonner, Storm Duck made the team. Very interesting. He was a rookie free agent. Kendall Fuller from Washington. Kader Kohu, he's a very interesting year for him. Saron Neal, I think he's a very kind of like a all-around type of a good, solid player and probably do a lot on special teams. And obviously Jalen Ramsey. Strength of your team, your secondary. Now, where's your X factor? Your X factor is what are you going to get out of what are you going to get on the boundaries, right? Are you going to get Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey? Are they going to be a good 1-2? Fuller, I think he's a good player. I don't know if he's, an upper echelon player. Good player. But then you got some of these guys, Ethan Bonner, Storm Duck, they're gonna be in the mix, your fourth corner, stuff like that. And then your safeties, which I think is a strength. Elijah Campbell, very solid player, good on special teams. Javon Holland coming off the 2 knee injuries, but a very good player. Marcus May, pretty solid player, some issues, but pretty solid player. Patrick McMorris, rookie, Jordan Poyer. So again, your safeties, I think Holland is very good. He's looked at as if he's great. He's not great yet. He has ability to be great. I think you can see it. I need to see the health, though, because last year he literally had 2 bad knees and he missed the end of the year, and it was kind of a mess. But if he's healthy, you're definitely going to get a hell of a lot out of him. He's going to certainly support and run. But if he wants to be this upper echelon safety that everybody thinks he is, he needs to make more plays. He needs to make more interceptions. He needs to more strips. You've seen it. You've seen glimpses. Definitely has the ability, though. He's also wants to get paid, so it's going to be a big year for him. Campbell, solid player, a little bit more on special teams. Marcus May, kind of same deal. McMorris, good story, rookie. And then Jordan Poyer, very good player, long in the tooth. How much are you going to get out of him? How many snaps? He's similar to Calais Campbell. Sometimes you sign some guys and what they look like on paper is a little bit better than what they're probably going to be where they're at in their career. And then you have the special teams, Jake Bailey, punter. He's okay. Jason Sanders, kicker. He can be good at times. Do I trust him? Not really. And again, special teams, I've talked about it a lot. I am not a fan of the special teams coach. I don't even know why he was brought back because last year your special teams was atrocious. But we got new year. We have a new system with kickoff, new system with rules. Let's hope their special teams coach, either doesn't get cute with the new kickoff rule and just tends to kick it out of the end zone, which I have a feeling he probably will. And if he doesn't, will we have enough coverage and enough intangible players on special teams? Because at the end of the day, when you look at this roster, you got to have some of these guys like a Saron Neal, who's a special teams specialist. And I think that's, a reason why they signed a guy like that, because last year the special teams was just not good. Coverage, field goals were up and down. The end of the year, he kind of took it to another level. The punter, he's not the greatest punter they've ever had. I think he definitely had the fact that the offense was so good and his punts were limited. I definitely helped him. So you better hope that happens again, because I don't think he's a great punter. And again, not to say the punter's the biggest deal, but all these little things add up at the end of the day. So that's your 53-man roster as we head into this new season in a week. I don't know. The first thing I'd say is it's not as talented as last year. And I think we need to see in the holes that were left by guys that left. Robert Hunt, for instance, some of these other guys that left, are they going to be able to have the roles filled by the multiple people that are going to fill it? That is the question. Health is obviously always going to be a question. You know, the depth on the team, they're deep in some regards. Running back, tight end. Right now, wide receiver, no. In the defensive line, are you deep? No, you're not. That's a worry. So there's some X factors there, but then you do have some positions. I think the secondary, you definitely have some depth. It's going to be extremely interesting how they manage the year in regards to the rotation of players and then what's going to go on when guys get hurt, because they inevitably will. Practice squad talked about Tim Boyle, Robbie Chosen. They signed D. Eskridge, another wide receiver, Naquan Jones, a defensive tackle. Got rid of Anthony McFarland Jr. Interesting. And, you know, look, you're going to see some stuff that goes on with certain roster moves, practice squad, what have you. Other things from the week, I've talked about Chris Greer, how he talked about, you know, the worry in the offensive line. You know, we'll see. At the end of the day, I'll give them this. Their philosophy is their philosophy, and that's fine. Greer, however, he's worked with a lot of coaches. He has not been the GM here the entire time, but he has been, you know, for a number of years now. He definitely is the GM who's going to kind of give the coach what he wants, and that's cool. I don't think there's a lot of dissension to that, and we've had years past where there was. So I think that's fine. The other key note from this week was Mike McDaniel getting a contract extension through 2028. Look, when you look at the moves of this entire offseason, I'm going to give them a lot of credit in they're all in continuity. They paid guys. They've paid pretty much everybody outside of paying Javon Holland ahead of time. And frankly, you know, he was hurt, so I don't see why they had to. I think they learned some lessons from like losing Christian Wilkins. But this is the Mike McDaniel, Tua show, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. The core is here, and the core is going to be here for a while. And the key is how will they continue to manage the cap and fill in as they see this window? Because you have these windows in the NFL, and a good example would be Buffalo, right? A lot of people will say, hey, their window's closing. I still think they're going to be very good, and until we beat them, we're their bitch, unfortunately. But their window it's still open, but it's definitely closed significantly because they just got to a point they just couldn't continue to pay guys. And their roster is definitely weaker. What you look at in a lot of these teams, like Buffalo and us, we're the same way, is will they get the top tier production out of guys that are rookies that are not killing your salary cap and making a ton of money? Can you get top-notch production out of cheap labor is really what it boils down to. Everybody thinks he'll take a step back. I don't know. So here's the part of the podcast where I am going to give you a season prediction for the Dolphins and their record. And then next week, we'll give you the prediction for week 1 as we host the Jacksonville Jaguars. So this season, very tough to quantify. But here's what I would say. I think this is a good team. I will reserve my right to think that they're a great team until they prove to me that they are. So when I look at from a record perspective and basically what I think is going to be, I think the ceiling is 11 wins. I think they're probably going to win 10, but I would not be shocked if they won 9. Now, God, I hope I'm wrong, because that would be horrendous. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, the only way this season is successful, at a minimum, is winning the division and winning a home playoff game. At a minimum. I'm sorry. You have too much money invested. You have too much talent. You have too much continuity. You've been to the playoffs 2 years in a row. Like, it's time. Like, we cannot, there's zero excuses anymore. Zero. Outside of the entire roster getting hurt, there's zero excuses. Now, will 10 or the ceiling 11 wins be enough to win the AFC East? I think it could, because Jets, Bills, Dolphins, and even the Pats, they're going to beat each other up. The worry here is, how good are the Jets? How good are the Bills? I honestly think, from a roster perspective and just the defense, the running game, Rodgers, I think the Jets probably have the edge to win the division. I really do. I hope I'm dead ass wrong. But that's kind of what I feel in my gut. Now, we'll hope the Jets become the Jets, but I think they're probably a slightly better scenario than us. I think Buffalo is going to be right there because they know how to win and they got Josh Allen. And I think the Pats are going to be a pest. And, you probably beat them, but they're going to be a pain in your ass a little bit. But for me, from a Dolphin perspective, that ceiling's 11, probably going to be 10, could see it being 9. If it's 9, it's an outright disaster, first of all. If you're 9-8, like, you just have completely went backwards and something went wrong, and either you played like shit or you had some major injuries. If it's 10, you're probably going to be in the mix. But if you sit here and tell me you're going to be the 6 or 7 seed again and you're going to go play in Baltimore for the first round of the playoffs, like, that's going to be not enough, not good enough for what you're paying. If you can get to 11 and you can win a division, okay. Now, could they go and win 12 games? Maybe. If you get one of those magical run seasons, a tough schedule. You really got to get out the blocks fast with those 2 home games. You got 2 AFC games, one against Buffalo. Like, if you can get to 2-0, we got something. Now, again, that ain't even going to be the X factor because you got to play well in December. But you got 2 home games in the first 5 days of the season. Like, you better at least be 1-1, and one of them better be Buffalo. So it's going to be a lot of pressure in that with those back-to-back games, short week. You already got injuries. You already got guys on the PUP. The Thursday game, luckily it's at home, so you get a little bit of a advantage there. But it's going to be very, very key to get off to that fast start, and then you go out, week 3 in Seattle. So that's kind of my prediction for the season. Let's hope we're at the ceiling of 11 or 12. But I don't know. I don't know if there's enough talent on the team. I don't know if there's enough intangible of those guys that are going to kind of do the little things in the dirty work. Last year it was too much, hey, we won on talent. Talent will win. Talent will score points. Talent will win games. Talent will beat bad teams, ultimately, usually, unless you really shoot yourself in the foot. But there's got to be that a little bit over-the-top X factor in special teams, in penalties, in in-game decisions by Mike McDaniel, winning challenges, challenging the right things. A lot of little stuff has to break